Where do we find the strength and energy to do great things in the world? And how can carrying a song in our hearts help us through times of turmoil and change? These are some of the questions I'm excited to discuss with fourth generation gospel musician, teacher, and performing artist extraordinaire, Dr. Raymond Wise, in this conversation about the classical Tamar masterpiece on ethics, power, and love, the Kural, or in short, the Kural. I'm Thomas Hitoshi Pruiksma, and I've spent more than 20 years trying to bring the music of this work into English, into an English translation that can touch people as poetry and even as song. And because this is a work that speaks so profoundly to us in the present moment and speaks to so many different areas of our lives, I've been inviting people into conversation, poets and translators, but also musicians and artists and painters and teachers and religious leaders of all kinds to explore particular verses. I'm delighted today to have as my guest, as our guest, the Reverend Dr. Raymond Wise, whose career as a performing artist, as a singer, began when he was 3 years old, singing in his family singing group, the Wise Singers. And from there, he's gone on to become a wonderful teacher, a musician, a composer, a dancer, an actor, a clinician. He tours the world, leading choirs around the world, across the United States, and sharing the joy of African American gospel music and spirituals and music, period, with people everywhere. If I were to list all of his extraordinary achievements, we wouldn't have time for anything else. So instead, I will simply say that I had the great pleasure of singing in one of Dr. Wise's choirs in Columbus, Ohio for 3 years, and the equally great pleasure of studying gospel piano music with Dr. Wise. And that experience has continued to nourish my work, not simply as a composer and a musician, but also as a translator. And I was drawing on that experience as much as everything else in translating this work. So I'm delighted that you are with us today, Dr. Wise.
I'm so excited to be with you today, and it's just a wonderful reunion. So glad that we're reconnected again. It's wonderful.
It's really wonderful. So the way that this conversation goes is, for those who are listening and watching, I've shared a particular chapter with Dr. Wise, and the chapter is on having energy. And the reason I thought of this chapter, I think there's actually two reasons. One is that of all the people that I've had the privilege of meeting in my life, Dr. Wise has had one of the highest levels of energy of anyone I've ever met. His itinerary alone would put most heads of state to shame. Tireless, enthusiastic presence in the world, really a gift in the world. And so I'm curious, how does a person come to have such energy? And I am also interested in how, when one of the things that I've taken, and that is one of the lasting lessons from my years of singing African American gospel music and spirituals and learning to play gospel piano, is something that Dr. Wise would often say in performances and concerts, which is that one of the great strengths of this tradition of music is its understanding, its conviction, that if we can carry a song in our heart, we can make it through anything, meaning anything. And so I'm interested to hear how these verses, although they come from a different civilization, they come from a different language, how they nonetheless may touch upon some of the things that Dr. Wise touches upon in his wonderful work. So my first question for you, Dr. Wise, is of these verses, when you first read these verses, was there one verse in particular that stood out to you?
Well, there were several. And as I went through each one, I was trying to think of all of the various things that would relate to each verse. But even from the beginning, the one who has energy, without it, what does one have? The whole notion of the energy that we need to do everything that we do in daily life. You must have something. And when I talk about energy and think of energy, I think of the word spirit. And based upon the African tradition as well, there was a notion of a spirit or an inner spirit or inner power within that helps you and guides you to do all that you need to do. And so often as we are going through our lives, many people are aimless in a sense, that they don't have a sense of where I'm going and what am I doing. I'm being guided by no particular sense or no particular vision, but it is that kind of spirit or energy within that rises up within you and says, this is what you need to do. This is how you need to do it. This is where you need to be. And it is difficult as I read that, and it says, how does one live really without that? But there are those who perhaps live and they don't have a sense that there was anything driving or moving or steering their lives. So I do understand that whole, verse, just, without energy, without that kind of inner energy and spirit, how does one live without it? And I believe it is that energy and spirit within that moves us and propels us on to the things that we're called to do.
That's so beautifully put. I mean, one of the notes that I made for this chapter in the back of the book is that the energy here is the energy and the enthusiasm for action. And I love the fact that in English, the word enthusiasm contains the Greek word theos, spirit, yes. God, yes. Divinity, yes. And that there is that Holy Spirit within us, known yes. by so many different names, which gives us the capacity to act, to do, to be in the world in a full and life-affirming way. And, the historical context of this chapter is that these are verses that were originally thought to be addressing leaders, kings or queens, leaders of places. And of course, now as we read this in the 21st century, we can think, at some level, we are all called to lead in some area of life. It may not be the leader of a country. It might be the leader of a household, of a community, of an organization in a community, an educational leader. All of these different kinds of ways we're being called forth. We're being asked to rise up and offer our gifts to the world. And I love how you draw our attention to how this very first verse, which, in a musical sense, sort of announces the theme, the way a symphony might announce the theme in its opening measures, announcing the theme of how central this sense of energy, of purpose, of enthusiasm is for us to become the leaders that we are being called to be. Yes. That's really beautiful.
Thank you. Again, I mean, just the sense, as we talked about the theos, the notion of spirit, wind, life, that is that whole sense of energy. And I find I'm often, told, well, man, you're just energetic, you're doing this, you're doing so many things. But I also feel I'm on a mission. And we're talking about that sense of that spirit that guides you toward purpose and fulfilling whatever that calling and purpose. And I do believe that each and every one of us is placed on earth with a purpose, with a unique gifting. And we don't always understand it. Some people understand it very early in life and move very quickly toward that. But others, it takes them a while to get there. But nonetheless, there is a sense that we must all find that inner calling. And once you find that, that is what propels you and motivates you and energizes you into action in whatever area you may decide to go.
That rings so true to me. I'm curious how, because as a little background for those watching and listening, this is a book which has 133 chapters, and each of these chapters deals with some specific aspect of life. So here's a chapter on having energy. Mm-hmm. And each of these chapters has 10 verses. So this is the first of those 10 verses. So I'm curious what other of these verses may have caught your eye after that first verse, or in harmony with, if you will, that first verse.
Well, I mean, like I said, as I went through each one, I was literally then analyzing each verse and trying to figure out, okay, this fits here, this fits here. But there were loads. I could go from each one by one. But there were a couple others that really stood out as well. I like the one, let thought aspire to the heights, even unachieved, it achieves. And when I think about African American sacred music and African Americans in this country and the history, the whole notion of being denied in so many ways. So many things were often taken away. And as a people, they were denied just access to the normal things you would need. But the one thing, as we talked about, having a song in your heart, that was something on the inside of your spirit that no one could take away. Having joy in your heart, No one could take that away. You could be stripped of everything else. But just like that, your thoughts. So when it says the idea of your thoughts aspire to the heights, you can dream all the dreams you desire. And even if you never realize them in the physical, you can achieve them in your mind, in your heart. And it is those dreams, those visions of a better day or a better life that energize you and keep you moving. I believe it was Jesse Jackson who says, people ask you, why do you continue to do this? Why do you keep going? And he says, without hope, there's no future. So the idea is, if you have the thoughts, and your thoughts can always aspire, and you can think these things in your mind, even if you never realize them, they are the thoughts that make you want to get up every morning and say, you know what, today might be the day that it happens. Tomorrow might be the day that it happens. So the idea of your thoughts, you can achieve, at the highest level in your mind, and no one can take your thoughts away. They can strip everything else, but they can't take your imagination. They can't take your dreams. And it's those things that energize you and give you the fuel to keep getting up day after day, expecting that you can make it through. You can make it through.
That's so wonderful. This is, in fact, one of my favorite verses from this chapter. And I think I can remember the original language. So just to share a taste of that language, I'll read the translation and then the original. So the translation goes, "Let thought aspire to the heights, even unachieved it achieves. Ulvedellam uirvullal, mattrade tallinum tallamai nirte." Let thought aspire to the heights, even unachieved it achieves. And as if to have a kind of musical accompaniment, there's a plane going overhead just to remind me of the heights right here, right now. And, it's interesting. One of the things that I've been really struck by in working on this translation is how these verses can resonate with so many different traditions. So this verse in particular reminds me of one of the songs I got to sing in the Ohio State University African American Gospel Choir and Spirituals Choir. One of the songs, there was a line was, I look to the hills. My help comes from the hills, comes from above. Yeah. And there's a sense, so I can read a verse like this and I can hear that song ringing in my ear as well. So, let thought aspire to the heights from whence help comes.
Yes.
And so that even when things don't seem to be happening, even we don't seem to be achieving what we set out to achieve, something is being achieved. It may be more mysterious than we yet can understand. And yet there is that energy, there is that spirit involved there.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are different realms at which and in which we aspire. We are so prone to look at the natural and the physical world and assuming that everything to achieve or to be achieved is something that we can touch, that's tangible. But again, that spiritual realm, in which our thought, our minds, our spirit, all the imagination lives, that's a whole nother place that brings a whole level of energy and inspiration that sparks movement and action. And again, idea looking literally to the heights, looking to the hills. I think of there's a psalm that says, "I will look to the hills from whence cometh my help." My help comes from the Lord. And that particular psalm was a psalm of ascent. And at the top of the hill was the temple and the tabernacle. So as they sang, the people would sing the song because their hope was looking up to the hill. And they would look up, and in the heights, there was hope. And because they saw that hope, that's what gave them the energy to keep moving up the hill, because they knew there was something greater. And that's very, very powerful. In our tradition, especially with African American tradition, there was always the hope that there was something better above. Whether that above was the north for freedom, whether the above was in glory with heaven or with God or whoever, there was always something to look up toward, as opposed to holding your head down, being downtrodden, but looking up and expecting. And that expectation energized everyone to keep moving forward.
So beautiful and so inspiring. And even just saying the word inspiring, I'm reminded that in its root, the word inspire in English has to do again with inspiriting, being filled with spirit, being filled with breath. Yes. And at some level, we get to see that all of these traditions are singing together in different forms of harmony, in different forms of counterpoint, if you will, helping us to know where we are being called, helping us to do what we're meant to do.
Mhm.
We have enough time. I'm wondering if there's any other verses that stood out in particular that resonated
Yeah.
with your own experience.
There were a couple. I like the one about even the elephant immense and sharp tusk fears the tiger's attack. Um, and there was something that resonated with me. No matter how powerful and strong we may be, no matter how accomplished we may be, there is still a kind of fear that we should have. And I don't mean fear in terms of afraid, but of reverence
Mm,
for just the humanity and reverence for the world and the universe, that we should always understand that no matter how successful we are, how great we may become, we are still human. And we must still be humble enough to understand that we are a part of the entire universe. We play a role and we play a part. And there are things of which or to which we should be fearful and not necessarily afraid, but reverence the power of other creations or other things that are equally as powerful. And that stood out. Then the one, strength within it is strength overflowing. Those without it are trees, not men. Then I think of this idea again of, the bodybuilder. You look at the physical physique of many people who are powerful and strong, and there is an outward strength that you see that people project, but many times there is no inward strength. There is no inward discipline. And you can have the kind of physical energy that you can push around, but without the inner energy and discipline and spirit that guides that outer strength, it can be off the charts. That's not the word, but it can be used in a way that's not as potent or strong, as powerful as it may be intended to be. So that really stood out to me. That gave me the sense. I mean, I'm only 5'4", so I'm not 6 feet tall, and I don't weigh 350 pounds with muscles over here and here. But I've seen so many people who are physically strong, who enforce their physical power, but the energy on the inside that should be guiding that power is not always as strong. So therefore, they're trees, as opposed to men. And so that really stood out as well. Many, they all stood out in many ways, but
that's so
that spoke to me in
beautiful.
that way.
That's so beautiful. I elsewhere in the Kural, there's a verse which basically says, "To fear what is fearful is the work of wisdom." That of
Yes,
course that there is a kind of reverence, like you say. There's a kind of uh, awe, awe in
yes,
the deepest
yes.
sense, that is necessary for us to be fully ourselves and fully humble at the same time. Um, and I
Yes.
love also the sense that you draw to our attention of this fundamental importance of the strength within,
Mhm.
beyond how we may happen to appear to the outer world. That strength within is so central. And I puzzled over this last verse when I was translating it with my Tamar teacher, because I thought it seems to be saying that it's not good to be a tree, and don't we want to honor trees? And my teacher directed me to a commentary from the 13th or 14th centuries, which made a beautiful point. And the commentary said, you can think of a tree. A tree is a glorious thing. A
Mhm.
tree offers not only its fruit, but its limbs. It is useful to other creatures. It offers a shelter. It offers shade. So it's not about trees being bad. It's about us as human beings being fully ourselves.
Yes.
Somebody who sort of tries to be tries to be like a tree is sort of not doing the work of being the human being, the man, the woman, the person that they're called to be. And that calling has, again, to sort of circle back, is right there at that center of that our inward strength, the strength within, our sense of energy within, our sense of calling within,
Mhm.
which allows us to be truly ourselves and truly glorious in the world. Uh,
Absolutely.
so
Absolutely.
beautiful.
Absolutely.
Before we close, I'm just curious if there are any questions that you may have had about the work or about my process of translating, anything that may have occurred to you in this conversation.
Well, again, the one thing that really stood out to me, when you begin to look at different philosophies and thinking over the years, again, we've had a habit of dividing and isolating and compartmentalizing everything. However, there is a sense when you talk about theos and that whole notion of that one divine being, if you will, looking in many different traditions, there was a sense that there was a commonality and a connection no matter where you go, you will come back to the same kind of principles. And as I read through it and I saw it, it's like, okay, this matches this, this matches this, this matches this, this matches this. I am now finishing up a work dealing with the history of African American music, but we've gone back to Africa and realized that even in many African religions, there were many different religions there, but they all basically had the same kind of underlying theological principles, even though they manifested them in different ways. And although people then ended up choosing specific religions or specific ways of expression, there were still those common principles which still brought us back to a universal place where all of us could connect. And that's what I saw when I began to read this. So it was just a point of gratitude, like, okay. Here's another place. And so, oh, I could use this here, or I can use this here, or I can put this on the wall here. I can remember this. So I'm just grateful and thankful. And let me say, I'm very proud of you as both a student and teacher and mentor of the work that you are doing, but grateful that you are bringing this work to light. Because I do understand, as we come from various traditions, there are many things that we know are very valuable and important for the world to see and to know and to hear. But until or unless someone says, I'm going to take my life and my purpose to bring these things forward, they will always be hidden. So thank you for deciding that this was important enough to bring forth so that we can hear these words of wisdom and they can be shared with a whole new generation. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. That means an enormous amount coming from you. And I want to say, thank you as well for those years that I got to spend singing gospel music and learning gospel piano were more formative than I think maybe people might at first think, because in trying to translate this work, I wanted to translate it into a musical language, and for me that means into a musical English that North American English, if you will. But for me that means drawing on the fullness of our experience in North America, which means drawing on our traditions as they come from Europe, as well as our traditions as they come from Africa, as they come through the African American experience. And for me, I don't think I could have understood this work to the level that I've been blessed to understand it if I hadn't had all of those pieces involved. If I hadn't been blessed with that experience as well, to tap into how all of these different experiences, though they speak of a similar experience, some of them draw out other flavors, they complement each other, and they can really nourish us in extraordinary ways. So I'm very grateful for that, and I'm grateful for you taking time out of your very full schedule to speak with me and to explore this work. For those who may be interested to learn more about Dr. Wise's work, you can look on the website of his, he's the president of Raise Productions. The website is Raise Online, RAISE online.com. You can also go to Indiana University, where he has a page where he teaches. He also, through Raise Productions, you can order his wonderful music. In fact, I have here my copy of 21 Spirituals for the 21st Centuries, which I've had at my side all of these years with great gratitude. So there's a lot, and meaning a lot that you can learn from this wonderful teacher and musician and friend. So thank you again.
Thank you, my friend, for having me. It's been great to be with you today.
Wonderful. Thank you.